Welcome to another episode of Growler Garage. Big news. We have another woman on the show for the second time. We got the lovely Emily Sherer here next to us. I didn't even ask, is that how I'm supposed to pronounce your last name?
Yes.
Perfect. Good guess.
You did good.
You might recognize her from the cover of Moon Eye's catalog, as well as many other modeling adventures. How you doing today, Emily?
I'm good.
Did you excited to be talking to people about taking pictures, which kind of doesn't make sense, but we're going to talk about it anyways?
Yeah, it's always fun because I know that there's plenty of people, probably more women than men, that are always asking me, like, how'd you get into this? What made you want to do this? And, like, kind of how do you deal with what makes it happen? So, yeah, I don't mind sharing what got me into it or, like, how I feel about certain things because I know there's plenty of other people out there who want to know.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to talk about. Is it obviously takes more, being a model of any type takes a lot more than just being good looking. Obviously, that's I guess check one. You know, people got to want to look at you, but there's so much more to it than that, right? Like, you can't just be a pretty girl or guy and all of a sudden be like, hey, take pictures of me, right? Like, let's start from the beginning though. Like, what did get you into? Well, I guess let's start before that. Let's introduce you a little more before we get into that. So like I talked about Moon Eyes. What are some of the other stuff that you've done, big or small? I mean, you obviously, I'm also paying attention because you're my friend, but I see you like all over the place now. Like, what's some of the stuff that you've done? Like, what's your resume like nowadays?
Well, I started off doing a lot of stuff like traditional pinup because you can dress classy and still look good and still kind of like draw a lot of people's attention. But I do the stuff for Moon. I'm their cover girl. I go to all the car shows, roadster shows, all the like autoramas, things like that. I've done SEMA multiple times for different companies. There's a photographer by the name of Mitzi, and she has Mitzi & Co., and she does pinup photography. She's one of the best ones out there. But I've been in her calendars, things like that. I do off-road stuff. So for me, like, primarily automotive is where I found my niche when it comes to modeling. And then I'll also promote for like liquor and alcohol companies. There's one, Deep Eddy Vodka. They're in Austin. If you haven't tried it, try it. You'll love it. But that one's fun because their little mascots, they're pinup girls. So they needed a redhead for their Ruby Red Vodka. Nice. And it was me. But modeling's been fun because you can kind of do a little bit of everything. Once you get to a certain point and you get yourself established as a credible, show up on time, like... You look like your pictures, no catfishing. But so
I mean, does that happen in the modeling world? Like, I mean, I guess it does. I just never thought about it. Like, people have their headshots or their portfolio, and then they show up, and you're like, "How old is this picture?" Like,
you're like, "So you sent us this picture from here up?" Like,
So like, is like the Facebook pose like a thing where like it's like from the top down, so like it hourglasses them a little bit, like
sometimes.
Oh wow,
yes.
Okay.
Sometimes, and then for me being automotive and all that stuff, it's funny because you'll go to things and I'll encounter other girls where, like you said, you have to be more than just a pretty face. If you're a pretty face, is it kind of a cakewalk? Yeah, it can be if you've kind of networked yourself around the right way and they know not to try to call you on any of that stuff. But I always like the fact that I go to things and like if I'm in front of a car, like 9 times out of 10 I'm more interested in what's the car, like what's under the hood, things like that than I am. They're like, no, Emily, you have to. I'm like, okay, cool, but can I look at this really quick? Like, can we start it later? Like, so I'm like, this metal flake paint matches my nail polish. Oh my gosh, like it's one shot. I love it.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, that's funny you bring that up because like at my work we had a Hot Wheels like exhibit the last few weeks, and it was more really about like the science of racing. So they had like an old slingshot dragster, an old front engine dragster there, and I'm like, and they were packing everything up to move out, and I'm like, hey, like, you guys don't have the stuff to start this, do you? And they're like, no, and they didn't even know where to begin. They're just people loading the truck, and I'm like, well, I mean, just, if you have some fuel, obviously we can't run on regular gas, but like I could probably teach you guys, like, hoping they just didn't really
pour some moonshine.
Right. Just don't push it. I'm sure I can find wherever I'm sure it has a lever to lock the I don't even know, the direct drive, there it is, on it, and we'll push start, it'd be fine, but they wouldn't go for it.
Aw, no cackle fest.
Oh, that would have, all the kids at the museum would have just scattered. They got nitro in their eyes, like, I can't see.
Like a scene out of a war movie.
They look like they just got like Agent Orange. Like, is that over the line? No, that's not over the line. It's been long enough.
Mustard gas. Mustard gas.
Yeah, okay. That's World War I's long.
Or
enough,
eye stinging action.
Right. Yeah, that's like I went to I've been like a bad fan of drag racing the last few years. I hadn't gone to any races at Pomona for like 8 years, and I finally went to the finals a few weeks ago, and I stood behind nitro car like you got to do. You see the yellow cloud, you got to walk into it, and I just stand there and I'm like, yeah, I missed this. Like my sinuses cleared up, my asthma went away for a little while. Like
you were blind for 3 hours.
Right. My buddy who goes, he's a huge drag race fan, like NHRA logo tattooed on his forearm.
Oh wow!
Like he's hardcore. Like he's standing there and he's looking at me and he's like kind of dying, and I have my best like face on. I'm like, yeah, no, this is fine. This is fine. I kind of grew up in nitro, but it's been a while, so I had some trouble. But to rewind a little, we got off topic. To rewind a little bit. What were we talking about? I don't remember anymore. Modeling, right? That's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
last time I checked.
So that something you brought up that was interesting to me is, I guess there's a difference between being like a model where you're posing and they take pictures and kind of trying to show something off, whether it be you or something else, and being I guess an ambassador almost, where if you're at a show and you actually have to interact with people and talk to people, then you actually, I guess you don't have to know the product, but it certainly helps, and being actually into cars probably gives you a bit of an advantage over some of the other people, doesn't it?
It does. And then being a woman with it, because for me, when I go to those things, I can draw more attention, not only from guys, but other women that are there that might like give that bored, like, oh God, how long was my husband going to talk to this lady for face?
Right.
It's like, hey, like, what do you do? And there's a lot of other women that go to these things that are into cars, that do like doing car things and going to races on weekends and shop for their own car parts and accessories and stuff, but they don't necessarily get the attention when you go to certain conventions as guys do, because it's still a very, like, chauvinistic is the wrong word, but it's still like predominantly a male industry.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to like talk to men about stuff and then like look at the women that are right next to them and just be like, hey, like, what do you have? And they're like, oh, well, I have this, blah, blah, blah. And then how we relate to stuff, it's like, yeah, that other interior, oh my gosh, it was like Target interior, so I upgraded to like the Louis Vuitton interior. I'm like, oh, so you have that really fancy like stitching thread where it's like $30 a thing? And they're like, yeah, I know. And then next thing you know, we're just as into it with our own lingo as all the guys can get into it.
That's a super cool way to put it, like comparing it to what, I don't want to say like what a woman would relate to more, but I mean kind of, because guys kind of do the same thing, right? Like maybe like if somebody that I know maybe is kind of into cars but not entirely, they'll be like, oh, why did you change the steering wheel on your car? Like what's different about it? Like, well, like, have you ever like gone like snowboarding and like you have cheap gloves and then you put on expensive gloves? It's kind of the same thing. Like that's maybe a bad example, but I get where you're going with that, like comparing it to, different places. But when I used to go to trade shows, I saw something that you kind of touched on for a second there, was if there's like a woman working in the booth, and chauvinistic, you're right, it's kind of the wrong way to put it, but if there's like, I had a friend who used to work at a brake company and she really knew her shit about brakes, but guys would go talk to her and kind of just nod and nod, and she was good looking, so they're kind of just wanted to talk to her. And they just nod and nod, and then they'd turn around and go ask a guy the same questions,
right? And
they'd get the same answers every time, and I'm just like, I'd sit there and I'd watch it and I'd be like, what the hell? Like she's worked on all these different, like she works for a cup team now, like she works for a high-end, top level, I don't want to say which team, but she knows what the hell she's doing, way more than I know about any of the stuff. But yet so many of those people would have taken my word over hers when she knew 10 times more about brake systems than I do. And it's sad, but the unfortunate truth is that it's still that way. Yeah.
And you have to deal with those people with a smile where they think you're just giving them lip service, and you're like, oh, okay, fine. Well, yeah. Oh, you want to go ask him? Go ahead, because it's okay. He's just going to repeat me, but by all means, go for it. And so you have to break it off with a smile. So
yeah, and I don't blame some of the people. Just were brought up that way, like they don't do it on purpose. They're not trying to be a dick. They're just those people that are like our parents' generation. Like women stayed home back then.
Well, it's unexpected, especially when I'll be at certain stuff or I'll hear a car drive by. I was at a car show. I was like, that engine, like, what just drove by? It sounds like the boat, because we have a jet boat that has a Oldsmobile engine in it, and it has this very deep, like guttural, like idle, and you just like hear it and smell it because it takes race fuel, all that good stuff. But I was just like, hey, that sounds like the same engine that's in the boat. And my dad's like, well, yeah, it is. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then you see these other guys kind of turn around, because I go to a lot of this stuff with my dad. Like, I'm this little girl that's drug around, and now I'm a grown up, and I get to go to all these things and have fun. And you see other guys look, and they just, it catches people off guard.
Sure. Well, and it's the nature of guys too. Like,
yeah.
Like if I'm at a car show and I hear a woman's voice say something like that, I'm going to turn around, and when I see you, I'm like, okay, that's unexpected. Like, you have my attention. Like, that's just men, like, in general. And it sounds bad. I guess it's not all men, but it's most men with a pulse, you know,
right.
and a lot of women too. You know, it's like, if by the same token, if my wife's with me at a car show and she hears a woman say something like that, even though she maybe isn't as into cars as I am, she knows enough to know that somebody knows what they're talking about.
Right.
Like, even if they know more than she does, it's real easy to tell if you know just a little bit about something, if somebody's just bullshitting you or not. So it would get her attention too, and be like, what? Who said that? And, you know, it's still pretty uncommon. I mean, car shows are mostly still 40, 50, 60-year-old men.
In a car t-shirt with a black hat, gray hair, and sunglasses. It's like, hey, have you seen my dad? Well, what does he look like? Well, he's wearing a car t-shirt, and he has a hat on, or he's wearing a Jegs hat that you get for free at every race. And yeah, and he has like Levi's on, but they're kind of faded. They're a little loose in the rear end, but who's aren't they at that age? They're like, so he looks like 30 of those people over there?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, he could be any of them. I mean, that's funny, because you basically described my dad, except he'd be wearing one of like the sun hats, like a straw hat.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Jack Roush
The Pomona hat.
Yeah, right.
I have skin cancer. I can't get it scraped off of my face again, so my wife made me wear this hat because I don't want to deal with sunblock.
Real life. Like, that's...
Yep.
That's...
Nailed it.
That nailed it, yeah. So,
that's my home.
So let's kind of talk a little bit about like how you did get into modeling, though. Like, obviously you've got kind of a lifelong infatuation with cars. Like, at what point did you realize, like, hey, did you just wake up one day and be like, I bet people would want me to sit on their car while they take pictures, and hopefully I don't scratch it? Like,
oh God, no.
Is that, you just woke up one day and you're like, I'm gonna go sit on that car and see if somebody takes pictures of me?
Well, as you know, like going to high school and stuff together, we had our photo class, and I've always been more artsy than I have been like, excuse me, like math inclined or anything like that. So when I was in high school, like I took a photo class, I took a ceramics class. It's like, oh, it's ceramics. Like I could be like those people that work at Mercedes or BMW, and then they like model the cars out of clay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I was kind of leaning towards that because I knew no matter what I did, I'd want to do something in the automotive industry at some point, whether it's that or like I'm talkative or marketing or things like that. So then when I had the photo class, I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I like taking pictures. I like taking pictures of cars. This is really cool. My first car show that I photographed was the Grand National Roadster Show in Pomona. And it was black and white film photography. I went back to school, went into the dark room, was making these prints. And I'm like, this is neat. And then I'm sitting at home, you're looking through car magazines. And I'm like, well, the stuff that I took is just as good as the things that these people put into car magazines. And that kind of inspired me to pursue a route of automotive photography. And as I got older and graduated and you learn how to draw your face on and things like that, I would sort of dress up. I've always been a retro kind of girl, so I'd always do my hair at the swirl and put my eyeliner on. More people were starting to take pictures of me at car shows than I was taking pictures, because I did stick out as a young lady dressed up with a camera, like all up in the face of a Merc or something. And they're like, what is this girl doing? Or like my favorite thing, which it's ironic that I have the relationship that I do with the folks at Moon Eyes, is because I would go to the cars with like the polished out moon discs and take pictures of the reflection.
Oh, right.
Where it's like you're taking a picture of this fender and the tire and the moon disc, but within that reflection you see like me with my camera and my little hairdo and bandana. But then you see like 10 or 12 other cars lined up. Right. So it was neat. That was one of my business card photos for a long time.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And just that kind of garnered some attention, and more people were like, oh, like you have long red hair, this or that. Like, well, can I take your picture? Okay. So I hung the camera up, and it sort of went from there. And then once I put my heart into it and a little bit of metaphorical elbow grease. Like things started getting published faster than I ever would have imagined, because I've never really seen myself doing anything modeling, but it was nice to know, like, because I kind of felt like the average girl who has the limelight on her for a second. So it's been fun to take that and run with it. And knowing where I came from, you never really lose sight of who helped you to get where you are.
That's actually super interesting. Like, so it was really you started to really take a shine to photography, and that kind of almost accidentally led to where you are. That's actually, I would have never guessed.
Weird,
that.
huh? It's kind of backwards.
But that's super cool. Like, that's a unique story. I don't think many people have a story like that. That's super cool. So unfortunately for episode 1 of this 2-parter, we got to call that one there. We have a lot more to talk about next week on the show. We're going to talk about the salt flats. We're going to talk more about Moon Eyes and kind of how that happened, and how one day I got a Moon Eyes catalog and I'm like, I know that girl.
Aww.
And so on from there. So make sure you tune in next week for more with Emily. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube and iTunes and Stitcher, and by now we're probably on the Google podcast store, but
It's actually not up yet.
it's not up yet. Yeah, but by now it probably is. Let's hope. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Keep an eye on there if you use an Android. Just use Stitcher like a normal person, or just get an iPhone. So hit subscribe, leave us a comment in the comment section about what you like, what you didn't like, and we'll ignore it if you didn't like it. And if we liked it, then appreciate it. So we'll see you guys next week for more with Emily. Make sure you tune in. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you.